Hi, this is Keelan Kyle with Decise, and we want to talk about the dark web, and particularly why does the dark web matter when you don't conduct your business on the dark web? So let's start with Kyle. Just tell us, what is the dark web?
Sure. So it's estimated that the dark web makes up about 5% of all internet activity today. And of that 5%, it's estimated that just under 60% of the traffic is meant to do illicit commerce. The other 40%, it's not all bad. We'll obviously focus on the bad stuff, but the other 40% is largely built on the premise of having a fully anonymous internet. So a full freedom of speech, especially in some parts of the world where they're not afforded that right. And so um, the dark web's been around really since the advent of the internet. Now, the protocols and the technologies powering it have changed, and we could talk about that, but there's always been a corner of the internet that's been used for nefarious purposes, and that's largely now contained within the dark web.
Okay, so how do you access the dark web?
Sure. So the dark web is built on a principle of peer to peer onion routing. It's kind of a funny term, but if you
Mhm.
think of it like the layers of an onion, essentially there's a certain technology that allows you to access into this network. And it redirects traffic through a bunch of different nodes. All of that traffic is encrypted, of course. And so the premise underlying the entire dark web is that's where true anonymous web browsing takes place. No collection of metadata, no ability to trace back IP addresses. And as a result, also no way for law enforcement in any part of the world to really effectively get into the dark web and bring down these illegal marketplaces.
Okay, so why is this important to companies that don't conduct their business on the dark web?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say that I just think is purely interesting is that the United States Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, actually does have a dark web presence. And it's kind of a cool idea. The idea is like if you want to be able to report something to the CIA, you can do it in a totally anonymous way. So it's just an example that it's not all nefarious. There's also quite a few blogs, websites, news sites that are out there because they can report with free speech, maybe in areas of the world where would otherwise not be possible. But I think the main reason that a business should care about this is just like a strong cybersecurity program needs to understand the vulnerabilities and exploits and attacks that their adversaries use, so too do the IT pros, compliance professionals, and people that are responsible for know your customer controls inside companies need to have an understanding of what the dark web is so that you can see firsthand exactly what are some of the techniques and mechanisms that adversaries use to defeat those key controls.
And so, I think some of the risk and some of the threats have increased in the dark web, especially as it relates to the finance industry, as cryptocurrency has grown in popularity and usage. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the illicit conduct that's out in the dark web is fueled via cryptocurrency. And so if you went back a decade or two, I already mentioned there was this sort of nefarious activity already taking place. But the hardest part of it back then was actually being able to pay somebody for an illegal act or an illegal product or service. Well, the advent of cryptocurrency has made that nearly fully anonymous or pseudonymous. So, when you go out to the dark web, you see a whole list of illegal activities that can be purchased directly using Bitcoin. And so, crypto has so much upside. It really does. The idea of the blockchain and the distributed ledger and all of the merits um, of the blockchain and cryptocurrency, they do come with a bit of a toll here. So in some ways, the dark web really does facilitate anonymous illegal activity, and it does make it harder for folks that work in control functions or audit to truly protect themselves.
So, can you give us an example? Like, what are some of the threats that now present themselves that companies need to be aware of? And what should they be thinking about so they can help protect?
Well, I'll think of like just what jumps to mind right away is three things. So the first thing for sale on nearly a daily basis is a full list of customer accounts, credit card numbers with CVVs and PINs. Like, be aware that there is a full commerce taking place 24/7, and some of that data, hopefully not, but some of that data is trading of customer lists of your accounts. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is know that there's a whole economy of hackers for hire. These are industrial grade hackers that can be hired and target attacks at specific businesses or specific individuals. And then the third thing that I'll say, especially in the context of anti money laundering or financial controls, there is an economy that takes place that facilitates the placement, hiding, and integration of funds. And those have been the anti money laundering schemes that have been around, as long as banks have been around. But the dark web essentially creates a centralized marketplace for these transactions to be bought in real time in a fully anonymous or nearly fully anonymous way, and those payments are taking place with Bitcoin. So those are the three things I think of as like, are your customer lists and accounts safe? Know that there's an economy of hackers out there for hire that could be targeting your business. And then there's also a full facilitation of washing, laundering of money, which is particularly troublesome and concerning for folks that are responsible for anti-money laundering and know your customer controls.
In a future talk, we're going to go more in depth on strategies that companies can use to be able to put controls in place and keep companies safe. But just to kind of start that conversation a little bit, how should compliance professionals just start to think about this topic? What are some of the first steps they should take?
Sure. Well, I think it's a part of an anti-money laundering control system. Like, remember, like a bunch of AML exploits also happen outside of the scope of the dark web. So don't like our point here today isn't to be scary. It's to just acknowledge that there's an economy of sorts, and that is something that does need to be controlled. Have controls in place to defend against this activity. But just remember, first of all, it's not the whole program itself. There's a number of schemes for anti-money laundering that have been around for forever. Tumbling, so that's the mixing of clean and dirty money so that it can't be traced. There's unregulated crypto exchanges. And of course, there's a bunch of offline peer-to-peer ways that the placement and hiding can take place. So just remember, it's part of it. And I think the biggest takeaway from our conversation today that I'd like to impart is that um, control owners have to start with threat mapping and understanding the mechanisms that adversaries use to defeat controls. And I was told one time a quote that I loved, and that was, if you can't whiteboard it, you don't get it. And so spend some time studying and understanding what is out there and why. And the way that we like to work, of course, is to go out there, experience it firsthand, roll up our sleeves and really see what that environment is like. But I do think that the first best thing to do is have an understanding of the concept. How does it work? How do you access it? What sort of goods and services, including the illicit ones that are used to attack your company, are trading openly in this marketplace, and start with a really good understanding and map those threats against your controls and start from there. And then in a future talk, we can get into a lot more detail about the defense that auditors and compliance professionals can deploy to defend against these schemes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Kyle. We'll stop there. We're going to pick it back up in a future conversation just about what you're talking about on how companies can implement controls and strategies to help keep their companies safe. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Have a
you
good
bet.
day.
Bye.